The previous lesson introduced us to the Jacobin Club, which was the most influential political club that emerged in France in the beginning of the 1790s. Now, during this time, it were the people who belonged to the less prosperous sections of the society who joined the Jacobin Club, and these people who belonged to the Jacobin Club then came to be known as the Jacobins. Now, the Jacobins were all set to destroy the symbols of power that the aristocrats as well as the nobility wielded over the people, and at the same time they consciously distinguished themselves from the rest of the society through the clothes they wore. We also learned how they were called the sans-culottes because they did not wear the knee breeches, which was very fashionable among the aristocrats in not just France but throughout Europe. Now, having been introduced to this political club, it is now imperative on our part to find out the importance that this club gained over the time in French politics. So, let us now begin this discussion on how the Jacobins came to power in the French society. Now, we have learned that only people who belonged to the less prosperous sections of the society belonged to the Jacobin Club. Now, these people were vehemently against constitutional monarchy because it was the constitutional monarchy that did not strip the monarch of all his powers, because the constitutional monarchy mandated that the French monarch still remained the constitutional head of the state. So, the Jacobins were very much against this idea of having the monarch as the constitutional head. They were against this entire system of governance in which the monarch still had any importance, which is why they were now planning an insurrection of many people to overthrow the monarchical rule. Now, what did they do? Finally, it was on August 10, 1792 that the Jacobins planned and implemented an insurrection. What happened in this insurrection? Well, the Jacobins now stormed the Palace of Tuileries. Now, we have learned that King Louis XVI along with his family members initially used to live in the Palace of Versailles, but it were the revolutionaries who compelled the king to shift to his Paris residence, which was the Palace of Tuileries, and it were the Jacobins who now stormed the Palace of Tuileries. Now, these Jacobins were of an extremist kind. They even held the monarch hostage for several hours, and they also massacred the royal guards. From this, we can understand how radical and extremist in spirit these Jacobins were, because they even held the monarch hostage for several hours. This was a very radical and bold step taken on their part. Now, following this insurrection of August 10, 1792, the Jacobins now started gaining importance in the French political setup, because they were the ones who were vehemently against the constitutional monarchical setup, and they were no longer willing to accept the National Assembly as the assembly of the state of France, because it was the National Assembly which gave the French monarch some power as the constitutional head, and it was this very National Constituent Assembly that did not accord political rights to all the citizens of the French society. So, when the Jacobins now ascended to power, they immediately replaced the National Assembly with the National Convention, and this body was elected to power on September 21, 1792. So, the former National Constituent Assembly now got replaced by the National Convention, and the National Convention was overrun by the Jacobins. So, it were the Jacobins who now started ruling this new governmental setup. Now, as we mentioned that the Jacobins were very radically anti-monarchical. So, the first thing that the National Convention did after it gained power in French politics was to abolish all traces of monarchy. We have learnt that formerly the estate system was abolished by a decree that was passed by the National Assembly, and it was the National Convention that, after coming to power, finally abolished all traces of monarchy. And now with this was established the First French Republic. Now the First French Republic was truly representative of all the people of France. Now when we talk about the First French Republic, it is very imperative on our part to find out what this word republic means, as in what we understand by a republican form of government. Now before proceeding with this lesson and learning more about the First French Republic, let me ask you a question. The National Convention was elected to power on this particular date. Which of these following do you think is the correct answer? Was it elected on September 20, 1792, September 21, 1792, August 10, 1791, or on January 22, 1792? Well, the correct answer is September 21, 1792, and this body called the National Convention replaced the erstwhile National Constituent Assembly. So let us now talk about what a republican form of government means. Well, by a republic we understand that the supreme power of the state rests at the disposal of the people and their elected representatives. So this is very different from the concept of a monarchy, in which it is just one person who sits at the top of the power, who sits at the top of the state. But contrary to that, in a republic, the people of the country, that is all the citizens, get to choose their elected representatives, and this happens through democratic processes. So a republic is a form of government that also entails a democratic setup, because it is through proper democratic processes that the people get to choose their elected representatives, and the power over state lies at the disposal of the people and these elected representatives. Now the French Constitution of 1791 was very discriminatory in nature, in the sense that it accorded electoral rights only to those French men who paid taxes of a certain amount. And it were these active citizens, that is those French men who paid taxes which were equal to 3 days of a laborer's wage, got to elect the electors and the members of the National Assembly, and those were men who belonged to the bracket of highest taxpayers. So from this we can understand that the amount of wealth that a French man possessed played the very axiom of discrimination, as it was instituted by the French Constitution of 1791. But when any new government comes to power, it always remains very determined to overturn or to abolish all the systems that were formerly prevalent. Likewise, when the National Convention that was overrun by the Jacobins came to power, it now started to draft and have its own constitution. So now came into being the French Constitution of 1793, and it was just as radical as the government was, because it was the French Constitution of 1793 that introduced universal male suffrage. Through this process of universal male suffrage, all French men who were of 21 years and above could now vote for the members of the legislative body. That is to say, irrespective of the amount of wealth that they possessed, irrespective of the taxes they paid, they could now function as proper electors, and they could also participate in the electoral process. So this makes the French Constitution of 1793 a very radical one. Now, just an abolition of the system of privileges of the monarchy wasn't sufficient to the Jacobins, because they wanted to wipe away all traces of the monarch, which is why now the monarch was tried, and the National Convention charged King Louis XVI with high treason. And what this event followed was the public execution of King Louis XVI on January 21, 1793. And this was followed up by the execution of his wife Marie Antoinette in October 1793. So the year 1793 has been a very crucial one in French history, because with this King Louis XVI and his wife and the monarchy as a whole was put an end to completely. Now, the execution of the monarch and his wife was interpreted as a personal success and victory by the revolutionaries. Now, the revolutionaries had lost a lot of blood in their fight against the monarchical rule. They were the ones who were oppressed and they were treated very badly in the old regime. Even during the years of the revolution, they had tried their best to overthrow the monarchical rule, and finally when the monarch himself was executed publicly in 1793, the French masses were overjoyed. When they saw the decapitated head of King Louis XVI displayed to them, they were filled with joy and happiness. They saw that this one symbol of power and oppression was finally put an end to. But this period of happiness and satisfaction, as you might think, did not last for a long time, because the masses now thought that by putting an end to this monarchical rule, they would be able to lead very happy and peaceful lives in France. But this happy and peaceful life in France was a myth, because the period that followed the execution of the monarch and the Jacobins coming to power was not at all peaceful and stable. But I'm sure a very important question is coming to your mind, as in what caused this period of instability in France following the execution of the monarch? Well, it is this discussion that we will be taking up in a subsequent lesson. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers, or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.